Okay, so Hilchos Nida. Hilchos Nida is one of the more fascinating areas of halacha, and I think part of the reason is our association, our familiarity, and the way that life plays itself out is, almost comical. I'm not pointing fun at the Yiddish mahalach, but before you get married, you learn a little bit about halacha, about something that is complete Chinese. As you're told it, the Chassan Rebbe tells you, "Don't worry, don't worry. After you get married, you'll ask shaylos and you'll hear shirim and slowly you'll understand." And then and then you get married and you realize, wow, Itaka was Chinese. I really have no clue what I'm talking about. Maybe in the beginning of marriage, you ask some shaylos, and then slowly it seems things drift, and it's a chaval. It's a chaval because, firstly, because Shmiras Halacha is important. That's number one. And number two, Tyrus Mishpacha is really important. Number two. And number three, and this is a statistical comment, is usually, everyone wants to always try to, whenever you say it's usually one way, your brain immediately has to prove that it's not true. But usually, in the area of Nida, lack of knowledge ends with one being machmir. Usually, unless you have such lack of knowledge that, everything goes out the window, and I hope we're not holding there. But usually you know something. You remember something about there's a color red and all shades of red. And with that, okay, so wait another day and okay, I think it's okay. I think it's not okay, etc., etc. So hopefully, and I will say from all the years that I'm answering shaylas, I don't believe there's been anyone that has actually started asking shaylas that has not walked away realizing there's more things mutter than usr. Not everything can be mutter; it's a different religion, but usually through asking shaylas, you start realizing that things are not really the way that they seem. So we're gonna Hilchos Nida is large. To break it down into 4 shirim is challenging, but we're going to try to focus really on that which is purely nageya, cutting out all the sidebars, etc. We're going to try. We're going to try to the best of our ability. And lastly, as a hakdama, part of the reason why it's challenging is because certain areas of Nida only happen as life goes on. So you're definitely not taught about those areas. For example, a woman's on birth control and she starts spotting, she starts bleeding, and wait, I wasn't taught about this. What do we do here? And it even makes it more challenging that the medical professionals are the worst people to ask because they don't really care in the world of birth control and all these things. There is blood, there isn't blood. It doesn't make a difference to me. Is she protected or not? Move on in life. And, so it comes with a lot of confusion. So with that being said, we're going to start off, we're going to go in the progression of, it's sort of the progression of life, which is becoming usr, becoming a nida. What happens once she is a nida? Becoming mutter, the process of becoming mutter and going to the mikvah. That's basically the 4 parts that we're going to break it down. Now, obviously, many of these discussions are more women related than men related. That's true. That is true. She is the one that's if we didn't know that part, then we have a big problem. She is the one that's seeing blood over here. But it's a joint endeavor. It's a joint endeavor, and it's really a crime. It's a crime sometimes that husbands, say, no, my wife takes care of it, and I don't know what she does, and she tells me when she's going to the mikvah, and that's it. It's a crime because first of all, what does she do? I don't know. Who does she ask shaylas to? I don't know. Does she ask shaylas? I don't know. So is she being machmir? Is she being makel? Does she know what's going on? I don't know. And it's a challenging situation. So let's become, as they say, educated consumers. Let's become those who can learn really how to ask shaylas, because that's really what it's all about. Knowing how to ask the shayla. Whether there has to be, a shir for women as well, it's a different discussion. But let's deal with what we could deal with and not do the proverbial pointing fingers that someone else should take care of it before we do. With that being said, let's discuss a woman becoming a nida. So a woman becomes a nida by having her flow, by seeing her period. We're going to use all the regular terms. If something is not clear, this is in every share. This is especially in this. So someone just, raise your hand for the guy next to you and say that he doesn't know what you're talking about. Well, we're going to try to put everything down into basic English. But if anything is not clear, please, let's do that. And I mean, we could give a whole shiur on the, the background. Where does Hilchos Nida come from and what's the purpose? We'll just say one Gemara. The Gemara Nida teaches us, you know why we have Hilchos Nida? It's a fascinating Gemara. And the Mefarshim all, jump all over it. We'll just begin with one line of Gemara. Rameir Eimer. What's the reason why we have Hilchos Nida? Which is interesting because it's Gezeres Hakasif. So, like, what are we asking exactly? Okay, says the Gemara, then they shall ruggle ba v'katzba. If there was no time of separation needed, you would be ruggle in your wife and you'd be disgusted by her. So, Amra Taira te Timeya Shiva Yamim. You should be tummy for 7 days. We know that's developed into many more days, midrabanan. But why? Kidei shetechaviva al baila. We want a woman to be beloved to her husband. Kishas kinisasei lechuppah. Like you're going to chuppah. So in the reality of Chazal, Nidus was designed, it's a pretty high bar, that we want to create a situation, it's like the moment you went to chuppah, which is an incredible thing to say. You only go to chuppah one time. That's like that one. That's what we're looking for. That's supposed to be the spitz bond. That's supposed to be the ultimate connection. And that's really where Chazal we're driving towards. So with that, let's discuss how a woman becomes a Nida. Again, we're really going to be cutting through a lot of the sidebars. If anyone feels that, it's too peripheral, we could go deeper, but for the sake of clarity for everyone and that we walk out actually knowing what's going on, we're going to try our best. So how does a woman become a Nida? So the first way is she has her period. She sees a flow. Very simple. It's that time of month. She sees a flow. She has a period. She is a Nida. Now, in the world of Chazal, if things worked like they used to work, actually, Bisman Chazal, women were like clocks. It was very simple. Once a month, she saw blood. It was her period. She knew it was her period. Her husband knew it was her period. There was no ambiguity. There was no lack of clarity, and everything was simple. That's the first way she becomes a Nida. But now, there's many other ways she could become a Nida, and this is where people get very confused. Because red blood, dam, does not automatically mean she is a Nida. The worst crime, the biggest misconception is the moment the woman sees red somewhere, she's out. She went to the toilet, she wiped herself, she saw some red in the tissue. She knows, she's within the time probably that she's going to become a Nida. She tells her husband, I saw some red in the tissue, I'm a Nida. She's on birth control. She missed a pill, perhaps. She took a pill at the wrong time. And the next day, she has some staining, sizable staining. She sees on her underwear splotches. She tells her husband, it's red. I'm a Nida. She is in the shower. While taking the shower, she looks down, and in the trickle of water, she sees some red. Oy vey. She tells her husband, I'm a Nida. In all three of the cases I just said, she's 100% not a Nida. Now, that sounds crazy, right? There was red, there was blood. It was blood. It really was. We know where it came from. It's not like, she had a nosebleed. We know where it came from. So what's going on over here? So let's get there. So a woman becomes a Nida if she has a flow. When a woman does a bedika, an internal examination, if a woman does not know how to do a bedika, whether she's married for 1 year or 10 years, she should have a conversation with a professional, a kala teacher. There are many women. I'm not saying this to scare anyone, but there are many women that unfortunately got horrible educations and they're doing bedikas, they're hurting themselves every single time. If a woman says that when I do bedikas, it hurts constantly, it's a reason to have a conversation. If you want something anonymous, I'll say call Taharenu. It's a wonderful organization, anonymous helpline, and they could help you. But a bedika should not be painful. Absolutely should not be painful. But we'll get there, Mir Tashem, when we get to bedikas. But when a woman, we're just saying how she becomes usher. If a woman on a bedika cloth sees any bit of red, then yes, she does become a Nida. So this is the one, today we're really going to be painting one contrast. And that's really going to be the bulk of the shiur today, which is when is there red, does it make her a Nida? When is it red, does it not make her a Nida? So, To make it simple, when she does a bedika is an internal examination, which means she takes a bedika cloth, she wraps it around her finger, she goes inside Isa Makam, it comes out. If on that bedika cloth there's even the tiniest speck of red, yes, she is a Nida. And the reason is because that bedika cloth was an internal examination. It's very simple to remember and understand if you just know what we're talking about. When we use terms that we don't know what they are, we say really, really silly things. Like the person that drops off will say the story both ways. The person who has a shayla, they have their bedika cloth, they say, yeah, there's a lot of red in it, but it's not the size of a penny. So it's okay, right? What? Or the guy that drops off the pair of underwear and his wife sees a pair of underwear and she says, oh, there was this tiniest spike of red, so it's not okay. So it's not about how big it is, it's about where did it come from. Meaning, and let's explain this. You understand the concept? It's so simple. And again, we get taught with when we don't know what's going on. So it didn't go into our brain in a place of understanding. An internal examination goes inside the woman. And therefore, if on that bedika cloth there's any dot of red, where did it come from? It came from Isay Makayim. It came from the Rechem. Came from inside of her. And therefore, that one dot of red makes her a Nida. And the reason is, without getting too deep into the sugya, is because really, and this will be the 2-3 minutes that if anyone wants to check their brain out, you could, because we're just going to go drop sugya just to get a little bit understanding, is really to become a Nida de Araisa. You need to have something called a hargasha. She has to feel a sensation of her body, that her body is bleeding. The Rambam says one sensation her body shakes. Other Mefarsh, other Rishonim say that she actually feels internally, she feels the blood falling down internally, not externally. It's a little bit crazy. Externally, you could feel when you use the bathroom, when you urinate, you could feel as the blood comes out. But to feel it internally, okay, she feels that it's that time of mother. Ramesha says his lamtis is she just knows that this is my time of nidas. These things don't exist nowadays. Women do not feel these things. Why do they not feel these things? We could talk about it at length. We'll go to Shevet Levi's pshat. Shevet Levi says the world is just too fast. No one has time to actually focus on what's going on in their bodies. That's what the Shevet Levi says. We'll just go with the alumnus because it's very easy for all of us to understand. And therefore, they don't actually know what's going on inside their bodies. But to really become a Nida, she has to actually feel it. So then I told you if the bedika cloth goes inside, it's because any time there's something that goes inside the woman's body, at that point, you can't feel anything anymore because there's something inside there. So you don't know right now, maybe at the moment that dot of blood came out, maybe she did feel it. So that was the background on this. If you understood that, great. If you didn't understand that, it's perfectly fine. But based off of that, again, if on a bedika cloth there's one dot of red, then she is a nida. But if it's not coming from internally, now there's only one other time there could be something internally, which is we're going to have to get to, and it's an important thing to realize. If she puts a tampon, that's internally. It's internally, which is the reason why there are times that a woman can mess herself up, which we're going to have to get to. But internally, the dotest, the smallest dot, one little speck of red becomes a nida. But even internally, even the smallest dot of what color? Red. What is red? Not what anyone here necessarily thinks what red is. We have a Kabbalah, we have a Messiah going back, all dairies. What is called red? Is pink red? Is brown red? Well, it's pink. No, it's not red. It's brown. But what precisely the exact shade? You ever did paint? You have like those 4 million shades. So which precise one is red? We have a Kabbalah. So much so, Bisman Chazal, they had even more precise one. They had mamish 5 shades of red. They knew the exact ones. We don't know that. So we're machmir on any shade of red. But it has to be a shade of red. Generally, again, statistically, when one thinks, oh, it's red, usually you give it to a trained Rav, and I say the word trained and I say the word Rav on purpose, because both of those are very important. The training more than the Rav part. It's a science, it's a chush. You have to pick up that there are some that could and some that can't, some that learned, and that's a whole historical share we could talk about a different time. How could it be that there's some Rabbanim that are machmer all the way this way, mikul all the way this way? What is going on over here? It's a good question, but you guys got to know what Messiah someone is coming from. But with that being said, even when there's that dot, and even when it was internal, it's only if it's red. So anytime a woman sees on the betikul cloth, she should ask a shayla. Why? Because what's the worst thing that could happen? Is she thinks it's usher like she thought it was. But more times, almost overwhelmingly more times, it ends up being, no, it's not. What do you mean it's not red? What do you? Okay, leave that to the Rav. That's not your problem. So that is detail number one. If it's not internal, it's external. What does that mean? There's blood that's seen on on a tissue, blood that's seen on a pair of underwear, blood that's seen on a towel, blood that's seen on the floor of the toilet, blood that's seen on the floor of the shower, blood that is seen anyway. I'm using the word blood. We're talking about you saw a red liquid. At that moment, that's when there's a specific quantity that makes her usher. This is called a kesem in halacha. A kesem is a din derabanan, and a kesem, the halacha is it's only usher if it's a shear of a gris va'id, it's a shear of a penny. So now we understand that it's two totally different things, and it makes a lot of sense, right? It didn't come from inside of her; it was external. Whenever it's external, we have a lot more leeway. Now, a penny, I know that they're no longer, but a penny sounds very small. Sounds very small. It's not very small at all. It's not very small at all. If you ever, next time you have such a shayla, you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed. You take a pair of underwear and you think, wow, there's a lot of red on there. And then you take the penny and you put it next to it and you're like, oh my, wow, that's actually not that really size at all. The problem is that blood doesn't fall in perfect circles. Blood falls in streaks in all different shapes. And you got to figure out the size. And furthermore, it has to be red. When it falls, oh no, it's red, it's terrible, it's the size of 3 pennies. Is it red? You thought it's red. Is it a red that is a we paskin is Nida? So that is the massive difference between ksamim and a bedika cloth. I cannot overstate this point because this is the 99% of shaylas in the world is this exact detail. Because we're going to get to when she has to do bedikas, and we're going to get to all of that. But once she's doing the bedika, we got to know that the smallest speck, she becomes aser, but it has to be red. And when she's not doing a bedika, we have to remember that the smallest speck does not make her aser. There's a size of a penny, and nachamol, it has to be red. But now let's go to the next step, because birth control really threw a serious monkey wrench into this whole story. Before birth control, everything was really simple. Problem was, God created perfect human beings, and science is still trying. And with all the science and all the birth control in the world, Lamaisa, they haven't gotten it right. And Lamaisa, and we could talk about all the different types of birth control. We could talk about the long term and the short term. I will make a mention. Yes, birth control is supposed to be a shiloh discussed. It's not a free pass that we just family plan as we wish. I want to wait 1 year. I want to wait 2 years. I want to wait 6 years. Now it sounds scary. Most, again, we'll go back to the trained Rav again statement. Most are very mindful of the same reasons that a couple often doesn't want to have a child. Most Rabbanim that you'll be talking to are within that mindfulness as well. Most. Really, we're coming lafuki, we're coming to exclude. We don't, even though nowadays it's becoming pretty popular, but in broad strokes, we don't really do get married, wait 3 years to have kids. We don't really do that. That's not what birth control is designed for. Now, are there couples that do that? Yes. And there are many Rabbanim that will say it's okay, and you have to ask a shayla. And often, yes, that's 100% l'chatchila. 100%. If a marriage starts on a rocky footing, we definitely don't want to have a child in there to make things even more rocky. 100%. And these are things to discuss. But what happens when you take birth control, and this is an extremely important reminder, there's many different forms. There's IUDs, there's pills. We'll just make them into 2 bread. Then you have the Mirena, and then you have and you have the new Nuvarini in the middle, but we'll just break it into 2 different things. One goes inside the woman's body, and one is a pill that she takes. We'll leave it at that, okay? Important. When she takes a pill, and this is where everyone gets messed up, the doctors prescribe you a pill, tell you to take it, once a day, and they maybe make mention, by the way, it's better if you take it at the same time. Oh, okay, sure, and for some women, gewaltig. Some women, they go on birth control, and then all of a sudden, so they start the pills, and then all of a sudden, they start randomly seeing blood. Randomly. They see a stain here, a stain here. It's not that time of month, and what's going on? Or maybe they'll go back-to-back boxes. You're supposed to take it, and then you're supposed to let your body bleed. Well, you do a quick Google search, and Google tells you do a quick AI search, but don't end up dead over all recent stories. Be careful. It's actually not good for medical information. Those who know the story is great. Those who don't, ask the guy next to you after this year. But you go and it says, you could go back to back. And it happens to be, this is one of the areas that Rabbanim in the world of science have actually advanced past a lot of the scientists, because we have rules that matter when we are in Nida or not. Therefore, there are many Rabbanim that have learned the science to figure out, tachlis, can I actually take the pill back to back to back to back? Does it do anything to my body? The scientists all tell you no. I'll tell you, no, you got to once a month, you got to let your body bleed. Really? Is that true? Okay, this is here, Rabbi Melber, that he did a lot of science on this. And okay, we're not gonna get lost, because some know what's going on, some don't. So let's just continue. But we have two types of birth control. We have a pill, and we have something that goes inside the woman's body. It's supposed to stop her from getting her pregnant. That's what it's made for. Some of them make her not get her period. Some of them make her not get her period. All different types. Great. We're not going to talk about different types right now. The one thing that we have to know is, if she's taking a pill, she should take it at the exact same time every single day. To the minute. To the minute. I know that sounds crazy. It's not a halachic statement. This is advice. Because when you don't take it at the exact same time, that's when she starts staining. If you want to know why is she staining on birth control, it's because the pill is meant to be taken at the exact same moment. So you find the time that works for her, whether it's 9 a.m., 9 p.m., 3 p.m., whatever it is, and take it religiously at that time. Religiously. For some women, up to minutes off. It sounds crazy. God's creation. Some women up to minutes off, all of a sudden they're staining. Now, what happens when she stains? What happens? So she sees blood. Where does she see the blood? In all our aforementioned cases. She sees it on her underwear. She sees it in the toilet. She sees it on the toilet paper. She sees it in the shower. She sees it on the towel. She's finding red discharge everywhere. So what is the halacha now? So if we didn't give this part of the shiur, and this is the part that when you take chassan classes, often they don't tell you, because they're not talking about this part of your life. You would have thought, oh, we learned what to do, right? It's a penny. Let's take the penny, and you're going to see a pair of, let's go with a tissue, and the tissue is, holy cow, there's so much blood on there. Okay, she's a Nida. You're Nida. And this is of the most common scenarios. She's a Nida. She's a Nida. Or you'll see a pair of underwear, and you'll see a lot of discharge on it. She's a Nida. This is a terrible, terrible mistake. Terrible mistake. She's absolutely not a Nida. Not a Nida. Not a Nida. Why not? Why not? Because the world of, we said, what's it called? It's called a kesem. A kesem is when it doesn't come internal. A kesem is when it's external. Some of them have specific rules. We'll talk about two of them, very important. One of them, if the blood is on anything colored, we don't care about it. Anything colored, we don't care about it. So we just took care of a lot of cases. Anything colored. If the blood is on anything that is not mikabel tuma, we don't care about it. So now, with these two things, we now have world wars in every single item. We're just going to go all the way to the bottom and just say what the halacha is. If it's on any form of colored undergarment, any color, I don't care, from beige to pastel yellow, choose your poison. Any color, she's not a Nida. There's no kisamim on colored. Now, if you're wondering, what was this, like a game? Okay, we could talk about it, not for now. Any colored, she's not a Nida. If it's on a tissue, if it's on a pad, a panty liner, she's not a Nida. Why not? They're not makabel toma. They're not makabel papers, not makabel toma. Big fights, or Moshe, the Rambam, v'chulu, v'chulu, v'chulu. When all the dust settles, she is not a Nida. So therefore, she could be wiping herself with a perfectly white tissue, and there could, yes, be discharge the size of 4 pennies. It's a nice little splotch over there. And yes, it's even red. She is not a Nida. Very, very important. Similarly, if it's found on the floor, she's not a Nida. If it's found in the toilet, almost 99.9% times, she's not a Nida. In almost all scenarios, I'm going to give a very broad statement because I've yet to find the one not. In almost all scenarios in which a woman is staining, she is not a Nida. However, with a tremendous asterisk, if we didn't get this asterisk, it would be an absolute crime. There comes a point that she does become a Nida. Why? Because if we stopped over here, this woman would go now for 3 years, never becoming a Nida, because she stains, and then it goes away. There comes a point. What is that point is very gray. It's very gray. For example, again, we're on birth control, whatever pill, whatever method you're using, great. And it's the time of month that she's supposed to see. And let's say she's not going back-to-back boxes, okay? She does one box and she bleeds. It's very simple. She goes back-to-back boxes. Usually what happens now, there's no usually. By the way, usually is what you know from your wife. There's no usually. And even as the Rabbanim, who the doctors, there's no usually. It just doesn't exist because every woman is different. But usually, there could be blood. At what point does the blood become a period? Because if you remember, we started with, how does a woman become a Nida when she sees her period? So what's a period and what's staining? Aren't they the same thing? Blood is coming from her makar. Blood is coming from her uterus. So I don't understand what the difference is. I started off giving you a blanket statement. What makes a woman a Nida? That she has her period. And then I told you, but if she finds a sizable stain on her underwear, she's not a Nida. I don't understand. Isn't that a stira? You said period, yeah. Sizable stain, no. What's the difference? The difference is what is called a period. That is the difference. What is called a period. And this is something which women often are very machmir on. Not that they even know they're being machmir. They think it's the time of month. They're having the feelings that it's her period. You know, she's having her stomach cramps or headaches, whatever she gets. And then, shalom aleichem, on her underwear, she sees a large stain. Shalom aleichem, she goes to the toilet and she sees a large stain. So in her mind, everything adds up. A plus B plus Z. Then she says, but I thought I was on birth control. Oh, they told me, and it's true. It is true. A percentage get their period. Maybe in that percentage. Or, I went off, or this is my 3rd month back to back. And they told me that eventually it breaks through. It's called breakthrough bleeding, which is true also. But not necessarily is she a Nida. And the reason is we have to define with precision the difference between a flow and a stain. A flow and a stain. The difference is extremely gray, and a shayla needs to be asked. I'm going to give some basic broad strokes when to ask the shayla. But again, and specifically in this area, everyone, mamish, the ganze Welt is machmir without even knowing it. They, in their brain, they just do math. It's that time of month. It feels like a period. I see a sizable quantity of blood. I'm an Nida. Medavgein weiter. The once that maybe the person asks a shayla, and often it's like not even about this. All of a sudden, what? I'm not a Nida? I'll just tell you a case that happened last week. Mamish last week. And this is an extreme case. It's a murder case though. Person, I'll give you all the details. They were on birth control. What birth control were they on? I believe they were on the Mirena. For those who know, it's an IUD. Wonderful. They were on it for about 1.5 years. Berech, maybe 2 years. I don't remember exactly. And they decided they're coming off. Excellent. She has it removed. Wonderful. She has it removed. And then shortly thereafter, there happened to have been a whole mess of a situation the month before, but let's not get into that. And then all of a sudden, she takes a pregnancy test and she's pregnant. Okay, beautiful. 3 days later, she feels her stomach is about to explode, runs to the bathroom, and boom, there's a lot of blood. So what does she think? It's a miscarriage. Which, by the way, if anyone has not yet, and I say the word yet, not as a klala, but as a statistic, and this is another thing that no one's taught, miscarriages are extremely common. I don't know the exact stats, you can look them up on your own, extremely common. Some will suggest post-COVID they're even more common. I'm not going down that road, but it happens, it might be true. Miscarriages are extremely common. Early term miscarriages are even the most common, and the reason no one knows about them is because no one knows about them. It's because she was pregnant for 1 or 2 months, and she loses it. And now, but it's extremely common. In this scenario, to mamish lose it 2 days after her positive is even more common. Science doesn't even get the qualification as a miscarriage. It's called a chemical pregnancy and weiter. Okay, very complicated. That's what it is. So they called with a shayla. She was totally bewildered. So I asked how much blood it was. Why did I ask how much blood it was? Now you're gonna understand through this shayla. We'll learn exactly what the story is, because she says there's a lot of blood. People say it's a lot of blood. How much blood? No, Rabbi, it was a lot of blood. It was a lot of blood? Yeah. No, it filled up. It filled up the whole pad. Okay. Can I see it? Sure, no problem. It didn't fill up the whole pad. No, you see over the whole pad, there's some red. That's not called filling up the whole pad. So when people talk, you can't believe their words. You believe their words, but they just don't know what they're saying. So you got to try to figure it out. This case happened to have been extremely complicated because she said it went straight into the toilet. She said it was a lot of blood, and she assumed it was a problem. So what I say to her, I said, it sounds like you're a Nida. Number one, always, please call your doctor and make sure everything's okay. But that's number one. Number one. And if we don't go down that road, that's called irresponsible. It's called irresponsible. Okay. That was basically how it ended. 2 days later, she sends me a message that I went to the doctor and the doctor says I'm pregnant. Okay, what's going on here? So 2 days after that, she went for blood work. And no, doctor says, your mom is, everything is fine. She went to the doctor, full examination. Everything is fine. Okay, what happened? What was it? It was called, and it's for the scientists amongst you, us, I'll read you the term. It's the first time I've ever heard about this, but I will read you the term. It's called one second, let me pull it up right over here. What's it called? Here it is. A subchorionic hematoma. Subchorionic hematoma. Everyone could ask that to their medical people in their lives, which basically means there's something going on inside. A hematoma means blood, and it came out. Wonderful. Now the question is she a Nida or not? She's 100% pregnant. By the way, now we learned another rule. You could be Nida when you're pregnant. Fairly common, by the way. Fairly common. Even later in pregnancy, it happens. And often, scientists, I don't think, have a shot why it happens. It happens. It happens. They have a fancy term. By the way, that's the way science works. I'm not bashing science, but that's just the way it works. They just label everything. Because when you label it, you feel like you know what you're talking about. They don't know what's going on there. They just give it a label, a fancy label. Again, I'm just giving you the reality. Okay, Lamaisa, it's very common. So is she a Nida or not? It happens to be this person lives not even in this state, not even in this country, and they live in a location which I happen to know the Rav there is a mumcha in Nida. Mumcha trained by some of the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael, Rav Shlomo Miller, just to give you a perspective. Shlomo Miller from Toronto. Shlomo Miller calls up this guy for certain shaylos. We're talking like next level. So I was mishadach the two of them. I said, please speak with this Rav. I called up the Rav. I said, can you help? I can't, it's impossible to figure it out. I said, maybe you could try to figure it out. What's going on? End of story was, after the Rav back and forth, 3 days waited, they had many conversations trying to quantify exactly what's happening. She was not a Nida. That's what the Rav paskins. Now, it sounds crazy. What happened is there wasn't so much blood. That's really what happened. She thought, because in her mind, she's pregnant, in her mind, the stomach, in her mind, there's blood. It goes in the toilet, plop, oive. How much blood was there? Let's work this through. So the reality is that if it's a stain, you're not a Nida. You're not a Nida. If it's on, colored, or something not makabel tumah, just in your mind, don't remember the words not makabel tumah. You'll have no clue what you're talking about. Just remember toilet paper, pad, or what. But you should usually ask a shayla. It is a good practice that whenever there is red, you ask a shayla. Whenever there's red, usually it ends up helping, and that's how we're going to end. In the last 2 minutes, we're going to end with the final 2 details. So at what point does it become a period? It's very gray. The point of that story was to show you how gray it is, and therefore you ask a shayla. The general rules that I was mikabel, and you can see this in the Archas Taira, amongst others, right? Wiener Sefer, Bloy, Yitzchak Berkowitz, this whole camp goes with the following mahalach, is that if you could take your fingers and measure it. This is a little bit way that you could see what's going on. Take the stain, take the panty liner, take the underwear, and it's on again. It's not makabel tumah, or it's colored, so she's not a Nida, right? But we're trying to figure out when does it go to the next step. So take 2 fingers and put it over the stain. If 2 fingers don't cover it, it's not even a shayla. Once we get to 2 fingers or multiple times throughout the day, because often what happens, woman wants to change, it's uncomfortable. So there's a stain on the pad, she takes it off. The stain on the underwear, she takes it off once, twice, and that's perfectly fine. She could do that. And by the way, we actually advise you to do that. Why do we advise you to do it? Not to play games, so that we can know what's going on. She never changes the pad and she keeps it on for 24 hours because it's super absorbent. At the end of 24 hours, there's so much blood in there. Well, what happened here? Often what really happened is there was a stain, and there was a stain, and there was a stain, but they weren't so much. So the general rule of thumb is you need to get 2 fingers worth, and that's when you ask the shayla. Usually 2 fingers and then 3 fingers, that's the point that things get scary. Usually they work themselves out, meaning usually what ends up happening, it tilts and it becomes a full-blown period, or the opposite. But we're portraying all these stories to show one thing, that it's gray. And we're not being clear for absolute reason. It's because this is one area that requires a real mumcha ois, a real science. And I will just say, please do not ask the wrong Rav this. I don't want to get in trouble for whatever, but please, it's a very gray area. It's a Kabbalah. It's a Messiah. It's not halacha. It's a very complicated thing to understand, but you have to know what's going on. That is that. We'll end with a quick chazara. There was one more detail I wanted to say. I don't remember right now. Hopefully, I will remember by the time we get to the end. We'll end with a quick chazara. It sounds like we didn't say a lot, but we actually portrayed of the most common areas of halacha. If we only heard this year, shir and the whole Shovavim, it would all have been kedai. Really, the next two, really, one is going to be harchakas. What do you do when a woman's in Nida, which is very important because everyone botches that one. Very important. I don't want to say that, but I just did. And number three is how many bedikas to do, which is also very, very important. Very, very important because you have all ends of the spectrum. You have a woman doing 2 bedikas a day, she's in tons of pain, and then she's having shaylas every month, or she's just being machmer every month, and there's no reason. You have the other end of the spectrum, you have the woman that's doing like 2 bedikas, one at the beginning, one at the end, because once upon a time she got that psak, and okay, we're going to get there. And then the last year is going to be getting to the mikvah and doing it with Yishuv Adas. So, here we go. The basic chazara is, when does a woman become a Nida? She becomes a Nida when she sees blood. How much blood? It depends on where she sees it and how she sees it. If the blood is seen on a bedika cloth, which when we get to bedika is very important, any amount, the smallest speck of blood makes her a Nida. However, it has to be red, and therefore you have to ask the shayla. That is detail number one. Number two is if it's not in an internal examination, it's either she wiped herself, she saw it in the toilet, she saw it on a panty liner, she saw it on a pair of underwear, she saw it on a towel, she saw it wherever she sees it. Then there is a quantity, which is a gris va'id, which is the size of a penny. But again, it has to be red. But one thing you do know now is that sometimes, this is very common, she'll wipe and she'll see mamish a speck. She's for sure not a Nida. Now, I remember the one thing I wanted to speak about. Baruch Hashem. And if I wouldn't have said this, it would have been a complete crime. Mamish a crime. Let's say in all the cases we're talking about that she's not a Nida. She saw a sizable stain on her underwear. She wiped herself and saw a sizable stain. She saw some red in the toilet. Well, each one of these cases are machlokes. But okay, there's one halacha that is relevant. She's not a Nida. However, tashmish, relations, is unadvised for the next, I don't like giving a number. Some Rabbanim say 24 hours. I think that's extreme. Some say a few hours. I think that's extreme also. It's somewhere in between, and usually you just have to get a feel for what's going on. And the reason is, why is it unadvised? Why is it not usher? Because she's not a Nida. She's not a Nida. Everything's mutter, right? It's an unadvised because what's going on right now is she's staining right now. We know what's happening. She missed her pill. So she's staining. Great. Is she a Nida? No, because there's a few stains. What's going to happen? They're going to be together. And now we're going to find blood in places that are going to create serious shadows. If he finds blood in his aver, if she finds blood in her body, if he finds those cases, not very often, but often, you're going to have to be machmir and considered a Nida. Rahman al-Islam, it might be called being boil and Nida, Hashem Yirachim, because this red, we know where it came from. It's just not the right quantity. But if it's seen b'shas ma'isa, then it's extremely shver. So very important to realize is that within proximity to the stain, to seeing it on the toilet paper in any of these cases, within proximity, one must abstain. For how long? That is where the shayla should be asked. If you don't want to ask the shayla, then just take it for 24 hours, which I tell you, which often is not the biggest deal in the world, depending on where you're holding the month and depending on the whole story. But that is, don't do a bedika. Don't do a bedika. Don't start doing crazy things. Please don't do crazy things. Ask before you do crazy things. So that is number one. If it's on the underwear and all those areas, she is not a Nida until it becomes the quantity of a flow. What is the quantity of a flow? Extremely gray, as we portrayed with a very extreme case, extremely gray. And the takeaway is to ask the shayla, because as you saw in that case, if that couple would not have asked the shayla, which most would not have, most would have said, no, I'm a Nida. Eventually, also, she would not have called her doctor right away, FYI, because why call the doctor? No, I lost it, weiter. And then what would have happened? She would have waited 3 weeks. And then she would have been like, holy cow, what is this whole thing? Just is weird. By the way, she was 2 months pregnant, not even 1 month pregnant. That was how because it was the whole whatever. Point of the story is she called the doctor. Then she wasn't a Nida. Call and ask. You'll be pleasantly surprised. And again, I can't overstate. Even when it's one dot, even when it is the right quantity, it's only red be'enei chazal, and therefore you'll see that the more that you ask, is the happier you will be. I didn't mention, and with this I conclude, I did not mention that when the blood is seen in proximity to using the toilet, officially in sugya, it's more machmir. I didn't mention that because we've never actually found a case. Ramesha says, unless she's running out of the bathroom. Okay, for those who know, those who don't, it's fine. I'm just pointing out why I didn't mention it, because it's basically not relevant. But that is part 1. Shkoyah.